It's time for the Friday Night Drive podcast as we recap week number 2 for the Friday Night Drive season as we roll along here on Shaw Local. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matt Rodewald. He's Steve Soucie, and he is all rested from a weekend of pretty tight finishes. It wasn't like week 1, but week 2 had its drama, no doubt about it. Right, Souce?
Yeah, I mean, it's developing, I think, into the kind of season where you're just going to have a laundry list of these games that are, within a touchdown of one another. I went through again this week and kind of looked at it. There were about 30 games that were decided by a touchdown or less this week. And you think, well, that's not really that many, but when you go statewide, I mean, you're looking at that. That's 10% of the games that came down to the wire, and that's a pretty substantial nugget of games that came down to that. So, when you have games that are last possession, things like that. I saw one of them on Saturday. I went out to Joliet Catholic and Glenbard West. It just feels like we're getting more of those, and I feel like this is what this season is going to be for us. We're going to have a lot of those games where you're walking into them going, I'm not sure who's going to win this football game, and you're not going to be sure until late in the fourth quarter.
I'm going to expand upon that as we get going, but just to set the table of what we're doing here for this particular podcast for the next half hour plus, we're going to talk about, obviously the week 2 matchups, kind of lean a little bit as we thread the needle into week 3, just a tad bit here, because we're always kind of in that stretch where we go, in the middle of the week where we're kind of looking both back and forward. We know coaches, they're already on to game film, moving on here as they get ready for week number 3, and we're not exactly blown away by the week 3 schedule, but a lot of 2-0 teams, also surprising 0-2 teams, and I want to get through those as well, but the difference between 2-0 and 0-2 for a couple of teams out there, just a matter of possessions. And I said this before we got together here, that I thought, boy, is this going to be one of those seasons where it's a handful of possessions that could determine somebody being 6-3 or a really good 3-6 team? I think that's where we're headed, are we not?
Yeah, I think so, and I'll go right back to that game that I was at on Saturday. When you think about it, Glenbard West is 2-0. They really need to be 2-0. We've talked about how good the West Suburban Silver Conference is, but when you really kind of go back and look at it, first game, overtime victory on a field goal. Second game, fourth down play, Joliet Catholic put a pass in the end zone that was maybe 2 feet out of the reach of the wide receiver, and a successful extra point. They're razor thin from being 0-2 at this point and being like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? We've got this conference schedule in front of us. And I think you can find 15 or 20 examples just like that, not only of the 2-0 teams, but the 0-2 teams in reverse, how close they would be to potentially being on the other side of that ledger.
And one thing that's interesting, and again, this is not college, this is not pro. Coaches don't get fired per se because of poor performance. I mean, that has happened, but this is what usually sets the table between a 2-0 versus 0-2. And I'm just going to give an example. A guy like Chad Hetlet who says, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. If it's going to be 0-2 and a grinder all the time because the frustration mounts and you're like, I could be home with my family. So, the winning and losing can be the difference for some coaches of staying with it and then just going, if they've been doing it long enough to say, I'm going to hand it over to somebody younger or somebody who's on my staff that I know is ready to go, and I'm just going to step aside. I'm not saying that there are guys out there, but you kind of get my point, right? With that, when you're talking about just the way Glenbard West started, there's other schools that are experiencing that this week for sure. A couple coaches that are probably, I'm surprised I'm 2-0, but I'm relieved I'm not 0-2 because then I'd have to rethink this whole thing after, doing it for a couple of years.
Yeah, it just feels like over the last 5 to 10 years, the amount of, the math is still the same. You're 0-2, you got to go 5-2 the rest of the way to just be sure that you're going to get in the field. But it just seems like, you get to that 0-2 stage and the pressure is mounting faster. And I think some of it is due to the fact that the schedules, for some of these teams are very, very difficult. You look at a Catholic League team, for example, that's 0-2 at this point. My goodness, I mean, what are you going to do in that situation? Now, you always have the situations that you can look to and say, well, it can be done. I mean, let's look at Nazareth. I mean, they've done this before. They've but you don't want to bank on that being your out because it's so difficult. So it's been really a difficult it becomes a real slippery slope if you're 0-2. There are some teams out there that are 0-2 that I would say I'm not worried about them. On the other end of the spectrum, they played these games for a reason because they knew that the back end of their schedule was going to provide them enough cushion to get themselves in the playoffs. There are several teams that are like that. And I tip my cap to those teams for going out and seeking out non-conference games and realizing the situation that they're in.
And we'll break those teams down. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll break those teams down as best we can here for the next half hour or so. And we love everybody to jump in on the chat here, especially if you're watching us on YouTube. We appreciate the comments that come in all the time. And we're going to break down the 2-0 teams that we've seen for sure. But just to tie that point on, having been on a coaching staff as a lowly assistant, I understand that this is not just a fall season job anymore. And the coaches that are watching us are nodding their head going, yep, you're watching film in April for 6 hours on a Sunday. You could be doing something else. When it's this razor thin, those things matter because wins matter to keep you involved and invested to the point where you're like, I want to keep fighting hard. And if you get snake bit so many times, you just tend to go, all right, I've just had enough. So I know there's people out there. I know there are assistants that are definitely out there for sure, but I know there's coaches that are kind of relieved that they don't have to think about that for at least one more week. So let's go through some of the 2-0 teams, and let's start in the Catholic League because let's talk about Mount Carmel because that was an impressive performance with Mount Carmel over the weekend. The first time folks here in the state of Illinois got to see them. When you go back and look at it and what we saw, what impressed you the most? We know they're good. Why are they good at this point from what you can see?
Well, obviously so much elite talent on the top of that roster. But what they have just below all of those Division I Power 5 recruits are a bunch of kids that understand their job and their role. So there's just not a lot of places, especially where an attacking offense can go, I'm going to try to attack that. There's nothing to attack.
No.
I mean, there's not really a weakness to kind of go after. So no matter how good you are offensively, you're not going to really find a soft spot in that Mount Carmel defense, for example. Offensively, you're not allowed the luxury to say, oh, I'm going to key on that. You can't do that either, because if you do, there's some other high-caliber weapon that can defeat you. So it's just got to be really, really maddening to try to game plan for this Mount Carmel team, just because there are so many top-flight performers on that team. This isn't a situation where you go make a little list of 3 or 4 players that you have to worry about. I mean, you've got a laundry list. Like it is ridiculous how long it is of players that you have to account for, have to understand where they're at and what their role is in this situation. So that's what impresses me the most about this roster. Not the top end, which is very, very good. It's just the overall depth of this roster in the sense of, there are, it seems like seeming every position of the field, there's somebody that's going to play at the next level, at some level. It may not be a superpower school, but, I mean, these are all tremendous football players, and they just don't have weaknesses.
And the other aspect of it, too, is, we alluded to this on Friday when we were watching them kind of wrap things up against St. Rita. It's really hard right now to go in there and compete, let alone win in that building if you're a road team. That's really, really difficult. And that aura, that mystique is really carrying nicely for Mount Carmel. We know the Catholic League has that mystique. It just does. It travels wherever it goes. You try and go to a St. Rita and you're a public league school or you're a suburban school, it's going to feel different. And Quincy found out last year for sure in the postseason. But when you're a team that's going in to play Mount Carmel, even within the Catholic League, look out, because the atmosphere is second to none right now across the state of Illinois.
I was talking to my friend Michael O'Brien from the Chicago Sun-Times at the Saturday game, and he said something to me that kind of stood out. He was at the Mount Carmel St. Rita game and said, I was really impressed with St. Rita last night. He's like, I know that doesn't make sense, but do you understand what I'm getting at? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I think I do. You're saying that for what they were up against, they looked good, and they did what they could do. I think that's, in some ways, that might be the quote unquote moral victory that a lot of teams have to shoot for when they're playing Mount Carmel this year.
Can you get 5 moral victories and get into the postseason? Does your name come up on the playoff pairings? Does Dave Bernhard read your name if you get 5 moral victories? I want to know if that's going to work.
Yeah, I don't know what the criteria is for getting officially awarded a moral victory. I don't know if that's so I'm not sure if it comes into the tiebreaker scenario or anything like that. But no, I don't believe that is a qualifying standard for getting into the playoffs.
Well, if we can figure out a way to do it, and you've got baseballs back there, I've got memorabilia, I'm asking a coach that's watching us around the state, if you have a sticker that goes on helmets for moral victories, just send it our way. I will, and we'll give you props for that, because it's not to say that that's not a point of emphasis, or it shouldn't be, or anything like that. I played on 1-8 football teams, man. You need moral victories. You gotta have those for sure. So if you're one of those programs that actually celebrates those in a sticker fashion, I want to see it. Definitely send it to my way. I'm on social media. Hit me up there, or at least put it in the mail and send it to our offices in Crystal Lake for sure. I'm pining for moral victories. I want to see it, especially those 0-2 teams that are struggling right now. Let's move on real quick and talk about some of the other 2-0 teams. How about Fenwick right now at 2-0? They've got Joliet Catholic this week. I know our commenters are looking at Fenwick and the Friars. I don't know a whole lot about them and how good they are. Give me an idea of what you know from them.
It was kind of a wild card type of team coming into the season. Obviously, losing an impact guy like Nate Marshall, who's now at Michigan, it's kind of like, what do we have here? They lost a lot of seniors. It's just one of those situations where I think Fenwick has demonstrated they've put together a fundamentally sound program here. And their schedule is not very forgiving, but they've come out of this non-conference schedule, went over to Paul in week 1, beating a crosstown opponent, Oak Park River Forest, last week. So they're one of those Catholic League teams that I felt like really needed to get through that non-conference schedule at 2-0, considering how difficult the remainder of their schedule is. Starting now with week 3, this is not your run-of-the-mill 0-2 Joliet Catholic team.
Yeah.
I guarantee they're going to be chomping at the bit to rectify this and start that climb back towards the 500 mark. They're not going to want to get themselves at 0-3, especially considering they've got some major hurdles on the rest of their schedule that they have to deal with. So for them, Fenwick has become almost a must-win.
How about IC Catholic? What do you make of them at 2-0? Nate Lang, quarterback for the Knights, awfully good. You look really good this weekend.
Well, when you look at IC Catholic, once again, going to repeat the same thing. Basically, needed to get through this non-con portion. I mean, we didn't know what we were going to get from St. Mary's in week 1. They handled them rather well. A friend of mine told me about witnessing them live and said, if they can get to 5, they're going to be a nightmare in 3A, because that's where they factor in the playoffs. Yeah. And that's the same situation for a lot of these teams. If they can just get in, they're going to be an underseed because of the way that these things are done. They're probably going to lose, 2 or 3 games in their schedule at least, end up being a 10 or 11 or a 12 seed, probably in a bracket, and a 10 or 11 or 12 you're going to want nothing to do with.
Is Montini on that list?
I think Montini's going to be a 4A team when it's all said and done, but same situation. I think that, let's look at it on paper. Everybody in their division right now is 2-0. So, just thinking that they could get through that on just their divisional part unscathed might be too much of a hard part to climb. So you're looking at crossover games and all those other things. You just have to kind of figure on, you're probably going to end up with 2 or 3 losses through this Catholic League schedule. I don't care, excluding a few teams, I don't care who you are. I think the logical way to look at it is your best case scenario, you're going to go to the playoffs at 7-2, 6-3, probably end up with a 6 to 8 seed if you're 7-2, something in that nature if you're in the lower 6 classes. But, I think that's just the way this is going to be. It's just reality.
We're going to take a timeout and come back, but when we do, we're going to talk, swing out to the south and southwest suburbs a little bit, talk about some Lincoln Way East. No, not their offense, but their defense. And speaking of offense, how about what the Morris football team is? I still am weird not calling them what they used to be called. It's just kind of strange for me. And then some love in the western suburbs and a team that has been perfect. Absolutely perfect in the red zone. We'll tell you who they are when we come back. Week 2, recapping it here on the Friday Night Podcast, Friday Night Drive Podcast here in Shaw Local.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
And welcome back as we continue on recapping week number 2 here on the Friday Night Drive podcast here on Shaw Local. I'm Matt Rodewald. He's Steve Soucie. We're glad you're with us here as we break down the previous week and take a sneak peek, a very small look as we look ahead. I want to go back to Lincoln Way East because we're going to do a lot of talking about them this year, but want to make sure that we give them some love. That defensive unit, 40-0, 41-0. How good is that defense? We know they have a superior quarterback, one of the best that we've ever seen here in the state of Illinois. But it's not fair that they get that defense too, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of look at it. They've got some very interesting pieces in the right places. A very experienced secondary on the back half that benefits from the fact that they have a couple of defensive linemen up there up front that Rob Zvonar has said time and time again might be amongst the best that he's ever coached. So when those two guys are getting pressure on opposing quarterbacks and they're throwing into an experienced secondary if they choose to throw the football, that combination so far is proving to be lethal for opposing offenses.
Couple of interceptions against Maine South. They learned about that really quick. But, when you look at their schedule, do you see anyone that can challenge them from, even putting a blemish on a potential 9-0 mark?
It's high school football. It's tricky to say things like that, but you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. I don't. I think it has to be. It has to be situations where the opponent plays practically the perfect game for them, and Lincoln Way East rolls out, one of the worst games that they've played in years. I mean, that's how strong I think this team is in comparison to what remains on their schedule.
Yeah, I know that Naperville Central was kind of circled for me. That I'm sort of taking the eraser to that a little concerned because Hinsdale Central put a little something to them this weekend. They're awfully good. Hinsdale Central, how good are they? I think we're starting to get an idea.
It really does kind of look like this team has kind of been lying in the weeds a little bit here. Good quarterback play from that team makes them very interesting. You just kind of look at what they've done in the past and wonder if they can bounce back. It's such a tough place to try to complete this bounce back, though, because now you've got a conference that has developed, 4 or 5 teams there at the top. Can Hinsdale Central break into that group? If you would have asked me that before the season, I would have said long shot. I'm buckling on that now a little bit. I'm interested to see what happens over the next couple of weeks with them, whether or not they can pick off one of these teams on their schedule, or if maybe the gap is still a little bit wider than maybe I'm anticipating that it might be. So they're a team right now. I would say there's probably 10 or 15 teams that are really, really on my radar here week 3, week 4. If I can find out whether or not those first 2 weeks of the season, whether or not those results can carry now that they get into that meat of that schedule. So, it's been a really, really good start for them. I'm starting to wonder whether or not it's a combination of things, or is Hinsdale Central, are they really, really strong, or maybe are their opponents maybe taking a step back as a little bit as well. So Still haven't been able to kind of figure it out what that is yet. But so far, really impressed with what they've been able to do.
I would say the balance of what you're talking about with West Aurora, more so than, say, a Naperville Central, but I do think both might be taking a step back at the moment. I know those teams don't want to hear that, and that's okay. I get that, and use that. You want to put that on the bulletin board, that's fine. I'm not trying to knock you down, but the reality of it is sometimes you just have these waves of seasons, and we've seen that, and that's okay. But, for Hinsdale Central, a team like this, we haven't seen them compete where a 2-0 mark catches the rest of the state's attention like this in a while. What would you say, maybe 10 years at least, since we've seen a Hinsdale Central team that really captured attention leading into week 3?
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, it's been a while since the situation where, like, I'm not debating that they're maybe the 5th best team in that league.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a while, because usually what I do is I stack teams in conferences, and I kind of fiddle with the rankings like throughout the season based on the results, but usually I start with them in 5th. That's like, it's been a while since I've had to debate in my mind whether or not they need to be higher, and I'm doing that right now.
Let's follow up with your fiddling with the rankings of the Fox Valley Conference right now, because we get to see a 2-0 McHenry team at an 0-2 Cary Grove team this week. Wait a minute, did I say that right? I did say that right.
Yeah, and when I was looking at that this week too, I was like, do I have to reconsider who maybe might sneak in the back door here? Because the Fox Valley is one of those conferences too that I feel like year on year, at least over the last couple of years, that before the season I've got a pretty good idea of who 4 of the 5 teams are going to be that get in, and it's really just kind of who's the 5th. Well, now it's looking like that all 5 of those spots might be kind of accounted for, but is there someone trying to punch their way in? I don't know. And there were some things that gave me a little pause in that thought process. Huntley struggling in the fashion that they did. Are they maybe a little vulnerable to that spot that seems to be almost kind of a given that at the end of the year they're going to be one of the 5 teams from the Fox Valley to get in? I know it's not a lock that 5 teams get in from a lock conference, but more often than not, that's what the situation is. You've got your 9 win, your 8 win, your 7 win, your 6 win, and your 5 win.
Sure.
That's when I say that. But usually those slots are usually pretty much taken over the last couple of years. It's been Prairie Ridge, Cary Grove, Jacobs, Huntley, and then the 5th spot's up for grab. And now Central is making their presence felt, obviously in a big way last week with that win over Cary Grove. I think now they kind of have to be included in that group too. So how many spots does that leave? I mean,
let me ask you, right? Yeah. And let me ask you the similar question to our Hinsdale Central conversation. When it comes to that Cary Grove Central matchup for 5A and 6A, is it a matter of Cary Grove just not being completely healthy right now, or has Central figured out a formula here? I know they've lost some offensive pieces from a team that was scoring a ton a year ago, but that defense seems to be pretty good, and that might hold up in conference play at the very least and get you to November. Is it a mixture of the same thing where we're starting to see one team going up on their way down?
Yeah, I think it might be, but it's hard to tell. But it once again, it was one of those situations. It's one of those things when you look at it, you've got a Cary Grove program, and they're high school kids. You have to remember that all. Still coming down off of that rivalry loss to Prairie Ridge in week 1.
Oh, sure.
Maybe got caught napping a little bit there too, just thinking that it's our birthright. We'll right this ship. It's going to be fine. And then maybe got punched in the mouth a little bit and wasn't quite able to recover. So I have no doubts that Cary Grove will figure it out and will be in the postseason. I don't doubt that for 1 second. But, where they get, how they get there is going to obviously be a little bit different than they're used to.
As far as that league goes, to wrap it up, I think Jacobs is going to be a team we learn a lot the most about this week as they host Central out of Burlington. It's their homecoming, so they'll be hosting the Rockets there. And if Burlington goes in there and does what it's been doing, that sets up a matchup for homecoming on Rocket Hill with the number 1 Prairie Ridge team coming there. And you might have the league kind of all sorted through before you get to week 5 when you think about it.
Well, it's weird how the schedule has been front-loaded. I mean, it's just one of those things where, 5 years ago, if you had told me that the schedule was front-loaded, I would have said, no, it isn't. It's not. There are a few of these marquee games, but that the landscape has kind of changed a little bit, and you're right. I think there's a good chance that we could have this pretty much sorted out, barring, someone really sparking up in the second half of the season, and it's happened before. But it is definitely odd to think about a lot of these key games are already going to be in the books after 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So not your ordinary situation. A lot of conferences tend to try to build it in a way that this doesn't happen, but that's clearly not what's going to happen in the Fox Valley this year.
Let's bounce around the state a little bit here and head out towards the Illinois Valley, because I wanted to ask you about Princeton. We talked a little bit about this to start the show on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. 0-2 for the Princeton Tigers. That caught us off guard a little bit because they haven't been 0-2 since 2017. What do you make of what the Tigers' first 2 weeks have been for them?
Well, and this is another classic example of, there's kind of a clear division in the Three Rivers Conference, and I would say there are 4 teams that are kind of in the circle of trust in that league, and Princeton has played 2 of those teams, and they have one of them left, but I have no doubt over the rest of the season that Princeton will right this ship and they will be fine. Worst case scenario, I think they would finish 6-3, still have a game left with Monmouth, a team that's given them a little bit of trouble in the past, but. Rockridge and Newman Central Catholic are the other teams in that group, and I think they are several rungs above the rest of that conference. So tough start for them, but I believe that team is one that we can have a little faith that they will regroup rather well.
I would like a Rockridge English teacher or literature teacher to draw us a circle of trust in the conference to see what that actually looks like, and then maybe a 2-paragraph explainer from each student. Whoever has the best one, send it to us. See, this is always education-based. I can do this sort of thing. The teacher in me always comes out. I want to see what that circle of trust looks like and the reasoning behind it. Give me a persuasive argument. Nobody told me there'd be essays on this show. How about Ottawa? Let's flip the other way here. 2-0 to start the season. This is my favorite stat of the week. 10 red zone trips, 10 touchdowns the first 2 weeks. Perfect. The Pirates are perfect.
Wow. That's an impressive stat. Now, the question for Ottawa is always the question is, are they ready to bridge that gap between themselves and the rest of the Interstate 8 Conference? Because really the only team in the loop that they've kind of maintained kind of a competitive rivalry with is LaSalle Peru. The other 4 teams are, let's be honest, a pretty wide chasm between them and where Ottawa has been over the last couple years. So can they bridge that gap? Can they be competitive with the Big 4 in that conference? Here I'm going back to the circle of trust again.
The circle of trust in the State 8. I can draw it for you if you'd like.
Yeah, that's one of those things that that you don't know yet. You're right to be a little skeptical of it, whether or not they can do that. But still, a really impressive start for them. This is a program that I don't know if they've had a start like this in quite some time. So, granted, Streeter and Plano are, in transition, and they're trying to get back to where they are a regularly competitive team. But Ottawa has really taken care of business. The stats have been impressive. They've done a nice job. It's just a matter right now of whether or not it's sustainable moving forward. So,
as you're talking there, I'm like, wait, they're in the Interstate 8. No, Plano is not in the Interstate. It's a non-conference game because I'm very confused at who's winning the Kishwaukee River Conference back and forth. We need circle of trusts with new teams with arrows pointing towards the trust. Like, that's where they're going. They're going up there. Give it up for our friends up in Harvard for that. Let's switch gears a little bit here because from a negative standpoint, we saw a game canceled that we really wanted to see with East St. Louis. What happened with that? And we got that late in the week. Can you walk us through what went down with East St. Louis to not get a game? We saw it a year ago, I believe, and kind of it worked out okay for them, but it's still not fun to see kids have a game taken away from them.
Yeah, East St. Louis has hosted what I believe they call as the Jamboree down there in week 2. for several years, they usually invite some schools from Illinois and Missouri, and there's usually a marquee game amongst that, and in this case, they invited a team from Florida, Gadsden County, to come up and play East St. Louis in that jamboree. Well, they informed East St. Louis that early in the week that they were not going to make that trip. I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday that they informed them of that information. There's been some internal program issues with Gadsden County. They faced some sanctions with some ineligible player use. Right before their season started, their head coach abruptly left for a college job. It's a program that has been pretty good over a while, but to classify it as being in turmoil right now would be an accurate assessment. So they guesstimated that it wouldn't be in their best interest to make the trip from Florida to up to play East St. Louis in this situation. So they elected to essentially forfeit that game. I was obviously crowing, and I believe you tweeted at me over the early portion of the week. I'm like, why didn't you tell us about this last week? Because I genuinely believe that we might have been able to finagle East St. Louis and Loyola had there been a little bit more prep time. I'm pretty sure both programs would have been willing to give it a whirl, because for Loyola, they had nothing to lose by potentially playing the game, because they were not going to get a game this week in any way, shape, or form. They were unable to schedule a game. They did not have a team on contract, so they do not qualify for a forfeit win. East St. Louis has demonstrated time and time again they will play anyone, anywhere. So I think if both programs would have had a little bit more time to prep and a willing field somewhere between the two schools, I think we may have been able to get that done.
My school district for which I work for is not between the two schools, but it is neutral, and I would offer that field in a heartbeat, even though it's grass. And my maintenance and grounds people will be screaming at me like, "No, we're doing it." That's what we're doing. So I will offer up that field. Just call me anytime. This is part of like our, with your scheduling open house that we're going to have in March, so that we can all figure out non-conferences. I will offer you the field showcase for potential neutral site games. So there you go. See, between ties that I have here in Geneva and St. Charles and good old Burlington, I will just, offer up fields, whether they're mine or not, and just make sure that we can get it done. See, we have the schedule broker and the field maintenance guy. We can get this done, okay? No more excuses. You can't find anyone to play each other.
I still have said for years and this is dead serious. I still think, that Illinois State game that we've had in the past where it's been one game, I still think somebody should put together a 2 or a 3 game slate with these teams that are all looking for games. And heck, I'm bold about it. Let's put 6 teams in a lottery ball hopper, spin that wheel around and pull over matchups. Like, seriously, we got 6 teams here, can't find a willing week 1 opponent. Let's throw them in the hopper, mix them up, see what we get. Seriously, I think that'd be a blast and fun, and everybody wants games. Let's have some fun with it.
Yeah, and some minimum enrollment restrictions, like, small town not going to, get East St. Louis, but Wilmington will probably be the one that goes, we don't care, who we got. They'll be the one school that will do that. But no, I would love to see that. I've been wanting to see that for a long, long time. Just some sort of open shootout type situation. So I applaud East St. Louis for doing that, for attempting to do that. Now, they couldn't get Loyola done. We joke about it. We joke about how they couldn't get it done as quickly as you and I wanted to, and the fans out there. Can you explain to me the logistics of trying to turn that around and why that couldn't get done? I think I could, but I want to hear you do it.
I think primarily it comes down to a preparation type of thing. Loyola had probably just accepted the fact that they were not going to have a week 2 game, so you flip the switch off and you're like, hey, this is a bye week. We're going to ease down into it. We're not going to do the things that we would ordinarily do in game prep because we don't have anyone to game prep for. Let's start focusing on week 3. That's the reality of our situation. Similar type of situation for East St. Louis. Everybody wants to be able to prep and know what they have to deal with on the other sideline. Prior to this coming up, East St. Louis would have had no want or need to scout Loyola or get information on Loyola, prepare for Loyola. Same situation for Loyola. They would have no reason to do so. All of this stuff, all of this prep stuff that teams like to have, you wouldn't have any of it. I mean, it would be, I'm sure it would have been an entertaining game to watch, but I think it puts a lot of coaching staffs in an uncomfortable position to go into a game almost flying blind. Most coaches I know never want to have that experience and will overwork in prep to not basically have the opportunity to do any prep. It's just not something that a lot of coaching staff are extremely comfortable.
And you're saying, well, that's not fair, but they've been in that situation. Just remember the COVID season in 2021, the spring season, where games are getting canceled all over the place, and suddenly games are popping up the day before that weren't on the schedule before. And so they've done that before. And having been on a coaching staff, I've been through the process. I called you during one of those situations to say, hey, do you have this guy's number? Because I was looking for games to get the team I was involved with to figure out a game. So yes, it is possible. It is certainly possible. But when you shut the kids down, so to speak, like in a bye week, and let's remember, Loyola has, loose NFL ties with guys that have been in the program, whether they've been coaches or what have you, that understand how to actually do that week. What day do we hear about this? Wednesday? Something like that? By then, the engines are pretty much... Go ahead.
Yeah, officially word was filtering out on Tuesday that I think that this wasn't going to happen. It may have been known a little bit before that even, but even then, it's still, it's still too late.
It's hard to ramp back up. And the other thing with COVID, that COVID season, your antenna was always on because you knew the possibility of games getting canceled, and then you knew that you might be on the road tomorrow as opposed to having a home game as a result of that. You just kind of had to adjust.
It was also a little bit of a unique situation.
It's just a different time.
Loyola didn't have, any real nothing to lose in that situation because they were going no contest anyway. In the COVID season, everybody was just trying to play. There wasn't weight to those games in regards to, if we use this game against a team that we're not prepped for, we're not going to the playoffs. It'll screw us up for this.
Yes.
It was just like, let's go play football because we want to play football. It was that kind of in its purest state. Like, if we have an opportunity to strap them up and play, we're going to take advantage of it. We're not going to think about the consequences of whether or not we get beat and how it affects our playoff point situation.
Yeah, and not to get too nostalgic, but you remember some Lamont versus Bolingbrook. Like, you wouldn't see that now just because of the class differential at the time. But they're like, hey, let's just go play. You're down the street. Let's go. We want to play. And the same thing was happening in basketball that season as well because there was no state tournament. So I certainly understand. I just kind of wanted to get that out there to kind of make sure that there was some conversation about it, just to know how tricky that is to actually do. But yeah, sure, in a perfect world, we'd love it to be flexible, but I certainly wasn't surprised to see that those two couldn't get together. Before we wrap it up, let's talk about 2-0 teams that deserve some love. Let's start with the Elgin Maroons, 2-0. Let's go Maroons.
When you look at the Upstate 8 Conference, somebody's got to win some of those games. Is it Elgin? Off to a solid start. It doesn't seem like on past history that they would be a logical choice for being a team that might be able to make a playoff run. But, that's a conference where you want to talk about wide open. The middle tier of that conference is there for the taking. If somebody can put together some consistency on a week-to-week basis, it very well could be them. It's one of those situations where there are a lot of teams in that conference that have struggled for a while. Maybe you get a little bit of a snowball effect going, and maybe it is Elgin. That was something that, after the week one, playoff projection that I do, I'm looking at that league and I'm going, I don't know what to do here. I really don't know. I'm that's about as close as I got to throwing darts as I do in this process. I don't really know. I don't really know what's going to happen here, and to be honest with you, what Elgin's done so far in comparison to some of the other teams in that conference, it stands out. So if they can continue to do that, I think that there's a road there for them. There definitely is.
And I want to come back to the Upstate 8, but just in general, remember they were locked conference, and then when they split, they got non-conference games. Good job, athletic directors and head coaches. You scheduled your non-conferences very, very well. All of you, everyone did. So good work there. How about Woodstock, the Blue Streaks? Can we just, get nostalgic a little bit about the good old days of Woodstock football that just dominated those middle classes for years and years? It's awesome to see that community at 2-0, and they deserve it.
Yeah, I can go on the Wayback Machine to a playoff game that I went up to in Woodstock and watched Woodstock pull open holes with their offensive line that I could have drove a pickup truck through. And so it's nice to see. It's really nice to see Woodstock, putting something together. Still a long road to go. They have a very difficult remaining schedule for them.
Yep.
And it has been a struggle for quite some time up there. But definitely a really good situation for them. Moving forward, get some confidence. Maybe they can string a few more together here.
I mentioned Bolingbrook, but usually we're talking Bolingbrook. But how about Romeoville, District 365, figuring it out? The Romeoville Spartans are 2-0.
This is a kind of situation the last couple of years with Romeoville. They've been so close. They've been on the cusp of finding their way in a playoff game. And then when you look back over the course of their season, their non-conference games are the ones that got them. They had some bad things happen in those non-conference games, a couple of narrow losses. But for them to come out of the non-con at 2-0 and feeling good about themselves and heading into a division, and I know I've used this phraseology a lot tonight, but we've hit on another conference that can completely classify itself as totally wide open. That Southwest Prairie Division, I could logically see, wouldn't shock me if Romeoville won that conference.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
That's where it's at right now. It is there for the taking. Some of the programs that have had a little success in that program seem to have maybe have a little bit of an experience of taking a step back. So I think there's a real opportunity there for Romeoville to not only stack up enough wins to get themselves a playoff berth. I don't think a conference championship is out of the realm of possibilities.
I want to throw a bouquet of flowers to the Spartan program as a whole. A couple years ago, I called the IHSA State Soccer Finals, and there they were, the boys soccer team making a run to the title game. And then basketball the last couple of years is starting to get their feels a bit, and usually Bolingbrook gets all the attention, but Romeoville's starting to get a little bit of that. And it's kind of cool to see with the Romeoville community adding football to it, because you add football, the crown to it, you know that you're going to be the toast of the town. Speaking of adding football to all of a sudden being good, I asked you this on Friday. I'm asking you this again. Is New Trier good? They're 2-0.
They are 2-0. And when we talked about them before, I was just like, I felt like this was a team that hasn't caught a lot of breaks. Maybe they're making some now. It is definitely a difficult schedule waiting for them over the course of the remaining 7 weeks. But the window of opportunity is a lot better for them as they go into that schedule with a 2-0 mark, having a chance to, really, all intents and purposes, 3-4 over the rest of the way looks possible. But when they go into that conference schedule, back half of their schedule needing to be 5-2, 6-1, something like, that isn't probably something that's going to happen with who has remaining on their schedule. But I think right now they are in a better spot than they've been in a very long time. I don't know if I'm still comfortable answering the question that you keep asking me, though.
I'm going to keep asking. We're going to find out. Maybe we'll get answers one of these weeks ahead. We're running out of time here. I want to mention 2-0 Mattia Valley because Jerry Miller chimed in on the chat and mentioned them. I don't know how good Mattia Valley is. I want to move on to Morris, who's 2-0. They go to Peoria this week. Is the over-under on that one 100? Is that where you're setting it?
Oh, I'd go way higher than that. This is a game that 2 years ago in playoffs was 78-58.
Fun.
They're they score. Both of these teams are capable of scoring points. Peoria's got 100 through 2 games. I'm sure they're not going to take the foot off the accelerator.
No.
It just feels like whenever these two programs get together, there's the scoreboard operator better keep that trigger finger ready to go because he's going to be busy.
I feel bad for the television reporters that'll be out there. The one-man bands will be shooting video because they're going to be doing this with their camera every 5 seconds trying to figure out where the ball is. And no punting, Peoria, no punting. Last one for you as we wrap up. Let's hear it for We Go. West Chicago. I said we would whip all the way back to the Upstate 8. 104 points for the West Chicago Wildcats. They're 2-0. What in the world?
Well, very quietly, West Chicago has kind of become a middle tier, run-of-the-tier conference there with eyes on more. They've made the playoffs each of the last 2 years, and that's something that, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would have laughed at that notion.
Yep.
I would have said, that's not going to happen. That's just not going to – they were one of the teams that would be, back in the days when I would eliminate a team from my playoff chase board when they picked up that loss, they would go quickly. And that they are not going quickly now. I think they've developed a pretty solid foundation there under Adam Chavez, and they are doing some good things. And I think we're probably looking at 3 years in a row in the playoffs, to be completely honest with you. The 2-0 start, remaining schedule very favorable. So I mean, and they have their eyes on being a little bit better than just 5-5 or 5-4 and get in. And I don't think that's an unreasonable goal for them based on what they have left.
Winning breeds winning. And with the Upstate 8, and I'll just wrap it on this, because some of those teams and how the classes have changed, some of these teams might get pushed down a little bit, 7-8, and that might make for some more favorable matchups than what we've seen with them in the past couple of years. Soucie, where are you going Friday night for week number 3? Where will you be heading?
I still haven't sorted that out, to be completely honest.
Really?
Yet. So, no, I'm still kind of looking around, seeing what I can figure out.
But, a couple in mind?
Yeah.
I'll give you my 2 in mind. I'll give you my 2 for me, because I'm trying to figure it out. St. Charles North and Geneva, because I want to see St. Charles North, but I know that Geneva is also kind of slipping the other way. I just want to make sure I get a peek at St. Charles North. Sorry, Vikings. I know they're the alma mater, but I am not feeling great about this weekend. But the other attractive one is St. Francis playing host to Loyola, about 15 minutes from me, because of the game a year before when Loyola was turning on the lights and St. Francis decided to turn them out.
Yeah. There's definitely a little bit of a history developing between these two programs, and
fun.
I think that would be an interesting choice. And based on what I saw from Wheaton St. Francis in Week 1, you never know. Maybe they can do it again. Loyola might be a little rusty. It's been 2 weeks since they played at that point. So
you can't be rusty on the Smurf turf. You can't be rusty in the Smurf turf.
Yep, absolutely not. So that'd be an interesting choice, no doubt about it.
We'll see where you end up this week, and maybe you can decide on it. So hit me up on social media, and make sure you let us know on Shaw Local. Make sure you tag Friday Night Drive on X. If you're following us on social media, it's at FN Drive. That's where you can find us on, and that's where you find all the final scores and all the scores and stories that we have, and everything that you're finding throughout the course of the week. Make sure you're finding it through Shaw Local on Friday Night Drive, and the redesigned website that is fabulous. If you haven't been there, make sure you go there and check it out. All the stories and everything that Soucie writes throughout the course of the week. Soucie, it's been fun. We'll do it again on Friday night. How about that?
Sounds good.
All right.
Can't wait.
9:30 for week 3 of Live with Friday Night Drive here on Shaw Local.